got me an energy drink. It's tastes like energy. So that's how you know it's an energy drink. So I'm gonna use the men's room. So I'm gonna go ahead and go like just took a piss. So now, yeah, that's what was happening while I was gone. Just so you know, on this very live stream. Technically, I took a piss on stream. You just didn't see it or hear it. But it was happening. Yo. We're on the site early today, so I can pretty much just kind of, fuck around until 7 o'clock. Although, I think I should just get to work. Or maybe eat my breakfast, which is a poppy seed muffin. I wonder if you eat enough poppy seed muffins, if you can get high. I'm never gonna try that. But it's interesting, to say the least. It's a nice morning on the site here today. Look at that sun. It's real sunny. There's a family of spiders living in the clocking shed right now. These are my shoes. I bought them. They were like $36. Crazy. This is where the spiders are. There's babies. There he is. He's so cute. Look at him. Honestly, I never thought a spider was cute, but look at him. He's so cute, dude. Look at him. He's so tiny, and he's learning to walk. It's honestly actually kind of cute. It's weird. Look at him. He's so small. And they they interact with their mama. He's just learning how to be a spider. That's honestly hella cute, dude. I just want to eat him. Look at him. I want to fucking focus. Isn't that actually kind of cute? Look at him. He's just tiny, learning how to do spider things. Just crawling around, Here's my hand for comparison. No, I'm afraid of spiders. But, like, look at this little guy. Like, isn't he just the cutest little thing? He's just learning how to do spider things. It seems creepy, but, like, he's so cute, you know? He's just learning. He's just crawling around, and Big Mama, you know, kind of waits around for him. You know, she makes sure he doesn't fall out of the web. Like, you should have seen him yesterday, dude. Oh my god, look at him. He's just, like, crawling around. He's, like, spinning webs and stuff. Yeah. I saw a bird's nest get fucking crushed by fucking sticks yesterday. And that was pretty, like, upsetting. It was like, damn. Well, I could have done something about that. Hey.
One.
Sorry. Right here. Careful, there's baby spiders right there.
Where? Where?
Right there. There's one just chilling in the web.
Oh, in the web. Okay. Oh, God, man.
Don't mess with him, because
Ooh.
he's just a silly little guy.
Yep.
I've been
I'd
watching
rather
him.
just let him go.
Their mom is, like, teaching them how to do spider things.
Kill us, yeah.
There's also other spiders that are more grown. I almost want to hold him, but you don't do that because that would be horrifying for him. That would not be an experience that was okay with him. He would be absolutely terrified. You know. I'm gonna name that little spider. I'm gonna name him Chantel. Chantel. I'm gonna be honest, it almost tastes like fucking boxed wine. Tastes like a beatbox wine. I should drink. This is a joke. Not serious, but I should drink some beatbox while making a beatbox someday. It's gross. Don't ever drink it. It's called beatbox boxed wine. It's fucking nasty. Like, I gotta be honest. I used to steal it from 7-Eleven with my little buddies. Then we drink it and get all drunk. It was gross. That shit is nasty. Straight up nasty. When I used to drink recklessly, I was a vodka guy. So I would just drink straight vodka. Because, you know, like, I just like to get straight to the point, right? I didn't give a fuck about getting the taste or anything. I just like to get straight to the point, like the Dorknot Keebler. So I just fucking take a fat swig of vodka, you know. The thing is, I didn't feel drunk until I was throwing up. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm not drunk enough. Drink more and more and more, and then suddenly I'm just like, okay, I'm drunk enough. Everywhere. But I didn't say it like that. I would get like fucking stupid, right? And then just don't drink, man. Unless you're a casual drinker who just, like, maybe you take a shot and you're done, you know, mess around a little bit. Don't drink if you can't control how much you drink. You know, if you drink a good amount and then you suddenly have a desire to get more drunk, don't drink. You know, or maybe just stop at one, because you will go over the edge and you will throw up. Here's the thing, when you're about to throw up, your skin feels hot and cold at the same time, And it's really uncomfortable. You get like really uncomfortable temperature wise. You feel hot and cold at the same time, and that's how you know it's coming. You know, you know, you can't put on any blankets. It doesn't matter what you do. You feel hot and cold at the same time, and you're like, oh god, and then you feel nauseous and bleh. You know, it happens very quickly. Feeling drunk, from what I can describe it as, when you're good drunk, when you're like nice and buzzed, it feels like warm. You know, it feels like when you're cold and you put on a woolen blanket and you just feel nice. You know what I mean? You feel floaty a little bit. You know, you're like, yeah, you feel stupid. You know.
Hi. Morning.
Morning.
Thank you. Duplicate punch.
Oh.
Thank you.
What?
Now, taking acid, on the other hand, here's how it feels. Okay, let me pull up a little thing here. So, when you start to come up, because it's not just like any drug where you're just suddenly high. With acid, you take it, about an hour goes by, and you start to come up, and you start to feel nauseous and uncomfortable, and like, you know, your entire you feel very strange. You feel a little bit nauseous, you know, a little bit like, you know, a little bit disoriented, and look, I'm just describing my past experience, you know. And then, you know, in about 20 minutes, once that's over, your entire body starts to feel tingly, you know, like weird. Like the way you touch stuff, it feels weird. Everything feels like it's buzzing, you know. You feel very tingly, and suddenly, you know, you'll look at stuff and the details of everything will start swirling and warping. You know what I mean? Like, if you've ever looked at one of those swirly videos on YouTube, and then you look at the ceiling or you look around and your vision's all wrinkly, that's exactly how it looks. But, you know, it's more detailed because the details of things are actually moving and swirling when you look at them instead of just being wrinkly. And colors pop. You know, colors are very bright and popping, and, you know, this is if you're having a good trip, by the way. I've never had a bad trip. You know, everything's always crazy, you know. When you look at things real closely, you can't actually see the details of it. You can't see the finer details because everything's swirling and moving. So, you know, it you know, it kind of looks like that moving texture pack in Minecraft where everything's like, you know, the textures of everything is rotating, but it's different because it's not at all like that. Like, it's not like it's moving like that. But it's like, you look at, for example, you would look at this, right? And it would constantly be changing to like different little variations of how it could look. You know what I mean? Like, it would constantly be making a little adjustments to the way that it looks and swirling and, you know, like changing. And that goes on for about an hour. For me, my entire vision was like chroma shifted, and I had like a rainbow glossy glint over my entire vision. Colors were popping and it was swirling. The texture of everything was swirling. Although it's really hard to control because you really have to maintain being calm. You know, even if you feel uncomfortable, you still just have to relax, and that can be a really hard thing to do because, you know, that's what we do, is we overthink things. That's why you never want to actually do it if you haven't, because, you know, it could have gone really bad, honestly. There, you know, it's a 50-50 chance depending on your ability to handle things, you know. Even people who are experienced, you know, like, may have a bad time because it's so, you know.
Not registered.
Shut up. Your 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 body doesn't know what the fuck is going on. Like, you may consciously know what's happening, but your body has no fucking idea what's happening. You know, it's confused and completely thrown off by the experience. You know, it's not supposed to happen. Everything that's happening is improper use of everything. It puts your brain on like overdrive, and it doesn't make you smarter. It makes you completely, like, it just makes everything confusing and crazy, and sometimes that can be an enjoyable experience, but other times, you know, also your attention span is completely divided. If you try to pay attention to one thing, if you try to just, for example, if you try to go to sleep, right? Or if you try to, I don't know, you know, watch TV or something, you know what I mean? And you're really tripping, you know, you're gonna feel uncomfortable because your attention span is everywhere. You know, you can't keep it on one thing because, you know, it's not enough. You need more stimulation than that. It's very, you know, you need, it's like, you know, watching those YouTube videos where you're watching Subway Surfers and Family Guy. Not even that would probably be enough. You know, you need more than that. You know, you need maybe like a video game off to the side, and you need to be drawing with one of those in front of you. You know, that's not exactly what you need, but that's my example. It's very requiring of constant stimulation because your attention span is so divided and crazy and switching from, you know, I was getting up, sitting down constantly, you know, switching from one activity to the next constantly because I couldn't stay fixated on one thing. I like describing it. It's fun. I love describing my experiences because, you know, excuse me, sorry. You know, where's my bucket? There it is. I like describing my experiences because it's, you know, it was interesting to me. You know, I was observing it the whole time, you know. When I saw the visuals, you know, usually you're too like mentally funky to really understand what's going on and observe what's happening. But during my trip, I was like, holy shit, this is the time where I'm seeing stuff. So I started paying attention to the visuals, and I started observing things because I was like, you know, I was like, okay, I need to put my mental funk aside and observe what's happening, you know, take it in instead of just sitting down and letting it fuck me, you know, because it can be quite debilitating. Like, you know, you really don't have that like mental presence because of how much that is going on. It's a very subconsciously activating experience, you know, very all over the place, you know. It's not, you know, and it's not like people think, you know what I mean? It's, you know, a lot of people think, you know, it's just, you know, everything changes and you're suddenly in some sort of magical dreamland. It's more like reality through a weird, crazy filter, and, you know, and your mind is racing and you can't keep your mind on one thing and your mind is completely divided. It's like mental chaos, you know what I mean? it's like your brain is going fucking crazy, and the only way to have a good time is to constantly feed yourself stimulation from multiple different things, constant distractions, so that you don't, so that you always have enough to do. That's why people take it and go to raves, because that can be a very activating thing for it. You need that stimulation. Without that stimulation, you'll probably have a bad time, not gonna lie. But, never, there's a lot of people who say this is how you have to do it. But honestly, those people are stupid, but I'm not saying do it because it's, it's not good. I honestly, it kind of messed me up a little bit. I had to, it took me a while to like recover from that experience, because it can be really exhausting for your brain. Afterwards, your head kind of, you feel very mentally exhausted. You're sitting there like, ugh, because, you just overused the shit out of your brain for 8 hours, and, your brain feels tired because it overworks your brain like hell. It's not like you're using 100% of your brain. It's like you're fucking, it's like you're fucking, you're fucking, I don't know, it's like your brain is fucking going crazy for an hour and freak wigging out, I'm just describing it because it's, it's fun for me to describe it, because I really enjoyed it, and that's only because I had a good time, and I could have had a bad time because I took more than I was ready for. I took 2 gel tabs, which is a lot for your first time. That's a lot. More than I should have taken for my first actual time. I'd taken a paper tab before that, but it was boring to me because not enough was happening. I was just like, this is normal. This is boring. There's not enough going on. I had some light swirliness, but overall it was a pretty mundane experience for me taking a paper tab. So taking those 2 gel tabs completely blew my mind because it was fucking crazy. I was tripping balls, like maximum balls. And I don't plan on doing it again, ever. Maybe when I'm retired, but hell no. Until then. It's not the secrets of the universe at all. Like, you don't think logically on it at all. You don't, anything you really think about is a delusion, unless you're having like a mental breakthrough, you know what I mean? And that's more of a shrooms thing, You don't have mental breakthroughs on acid. It's a party drug. So you're not gonna have any sort of special knowledge that you get out of it or anything. You're just gonna fucking be confused and, and unless you just kind of fuck around and don't fucking, try to seek any ancient knowledge. Just fucking go ham, party while you're on it, but don't take it because, if you don't want to, if you're not a substance user, don't take it because it's not for everybody at all. If you haven't had any experience with any sort of drug, it's not a good idea at all. It's a horrible idea unless unless you're already kind of reckless with your life. I don't do this type of stuff anymore, because I shouldn't do this type of stuff anymore. I mean, it's dangerous, it's not safe to do that, there's a reason why it's illegal, because you can completely fucking lose your mind, you know? And if you take it and you don't wait like a good amount of time for your brain to recover, then you can fry your brain. It's not even a joke. You can fucking, during that period where your brain is exhausted, I wanted to do it again. You know what I mean? Like, as soon as I took it, I wanted to do it again immediately. I couldn't stop thinking about it for the rest of the week. And for the rest of the month, I was constantly thinking, man, I want to take acid again. But if you take it while your brain is exhausted, then you can fuck up your brain, you know? You don't want to take it more than like, once again, if you're, first of all, you don't want to take it at all if you're not like, if you're not if that isn't your lifestyle. But you especially don't want to take it again if you've already taken it within the past year, because seriously, it can really do some real damage that is irreversible, even once can really do a lot, but I don't know, it's fun for me because, I mean, if you don't do drugs and you want to, just do like fucking VR or something, you know what I mean? Plenty of other things exist, For me, in my previously druggy lifestyle, that shit was absolutely insane. You know what I mean? In reality, it's truly seeing something lifelike and otherworldly, and you see shit. You see the world in a way that kind of makes normal reality look less cool, because, normal fucking, oh god, hair math. Because it's fucking amazing. I'm not gonna lie. It's cool. It's the only time in my life where I've seen something truly otherworldly with all the visual complexities of real life. It was the most otherworldly, crazy thing I've ever seen. More crazy than any video game. More crazy than any fucking anything. And I have yet to see a video game that even comes close to replicating this at all. I have yet to see a piece of media that even gets close to... Well, there's one guy on YouTube who makes these little simulations. They're pretty accurate, but I still don't think they even really totally get it. The visuals, maybe they get it a little bit, but like, I have yet to see a piece of media that really gets it, And I've tried with my previous pieces of media. There's one on the Ace PJ's channel where I kind of tried to get it a little bit. And for me, I got it close. I got it a little bit close to what my experience was like. But even then, it's not the same. There's a cool song on SoundCloud that kind of gets it. It's a person. Oh, I'll share it one day. It's cool. It's this person who makes music, and one of their songs really captures it through music. But it's still, well, no, I want to see. Maybe that piece of media really does kind of get it. It captures the chaos. But other than that, nothing can really describe how crazy it is to see everything the way you see it, with all the details of everything not maintaining like a solid look, nothing visually maintains like a solid detail, because you see patterns in everything, There's nothing you're gonna look at where you don't automatically skip straight to a pattern in it. You know what I mean? I was looking, we had this bumpy white ceiling where we were. I looked at the ceiling and the whole ceiling was like fractals because all the white little bumps like merged together and became fractals. It's fucking crazy, you know. That doesn't mean universe anything. That just means I was seeing patterns in everything, you know. Because your fucking pattern recognition is fucking going crazy. You know what I mean? But it was interesting. You know? I still remember it pretty well, and I think about it often, you know? I don't think I could ever capture what it was really like without, you know... I wish I could do it and not have it be unhealthy, you know? But I don't ever want to do it again because, you know, that's not a good idea. Man, you know. God. It was something else, man. You know. Something else. This man is not the same, and it hasn't been. You know. I now require a lot to be entertained. You know, it takes a lot to entertain me. You know, and it takes something. I can't play a finite video game. It has to have, you know, the end can't be like a thing that I encounter. You know, I can't play, for example, what's a game with an end? I don't usually play games that have an ending where you restart the whole game, you know, afterwards. I can't play games like that at all. Like, if I play games like that, no, I just don't want to, you know, it's boring. I don't want to do that, you know, screw that shit. I want a game where it doesn't have to end, and I can just fuck around the whole time, you know, like Minecraft or Terraria, you know. You know, I'd rather just feel immortalized in the game and continue to just, you know, I like sandbox games. I can only play sandbox games. But that's not how it is for everybody. Experience is different from what I understand. But there may be similarities between people's experiences. Me and someone who shall remain nameless had that experience together. We were both doing the same thing at the time. I'm not going to say who, but, you know, we were both tripping balls that day. And we had a similar experience, but not exactly the same. It was different. But, you know, we did notice some things that were similar about both of our experiences visually, you know. It's just, for us, it began differently, you know, but it relatively became the same after a while. But it wasn't exactly the same because, you know, we think about different things. So, you know, I don't know. I love it, you know. But I like being sober more because, you know, I feel free and not confined to something. You know, I feel like I don't need it to enjoy life. You know, there's other things in life I can enjoy, just nothing quite as visually stimulating. I'll never see something as crazy. I'll never see something as entertaining, but, you know, there's things that are pretty entertaining that I will enjoy, you know, that are not even close to as, you know, interesting, but, you know, things that are very interesting nonetheless, you know. And that's just my opinion. Some people find things more interesting. For me, there'll never be anything as interesting, but that's okay because, you know, I got what I needed, which was information. You know, I was educated on how it works and what you experience, and that's all I needed from the experience, you know. Anything more would just be fucking useless, you know. I mean, what, you know, I went in with a goal, and my goal was to find out, you know. I did. You know. You know. And I did a lot of experimenting with mushrooms too. And that's the one where you really think about stuff, you know? With acid, I wasn't really thinking about anything. I was just seeing stuff and like, wow, the whole time. But with acid, or with mushrooms, you really think about everything. It, like, I feel like what it does is it just kind of silences your ego. So you just kind of look at everything humbly and amazed, and you think about it deeply, you know? Once again, it's not going to give you the answers to the fucking universe. You kind of have to already be a deep thinker, you know? Kind of already have to be, you know, kind of already have to be like curious and informed to be able to go in and have those deep, valuable thoughts. I wasn't really informed at the time, so I just kind of went in and was like, oh, whoa, you know, making stuff up and believing it. But then, you know, I learned a little bit more and started microdosing over a brief period of time, over the span of about a week, and, you know, taught myself some pretty cool lessons, you know, and it felt more productive than acid was. In terms of how they feel, like mushrooms is more wavy, you know, everything's slow and wavy and, you know, still a little bit crazy depending on how much you take. But if you're just doing like a regular dose, just a regular time, nothing too crazy, just a regular amount, then it's just slow and wavy and, you know, you feel like up and down, kind of like a sine wave, you know, wobbly a little bit, you know, a little bit spinny, swirly. So a lot of people throw up because it's very wavy and wobbly and slow and like, you know, wavy. But it's like the peace, man. Peace and love and other things. That's not what I experienced. I just had a lot of deep thoughts and theories like, oh my God, God is a mushroom and blah, 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 blah. But that was just kind of delusional thinking. Nothing logical or anything. The real logic came in when I taught myself lesson-wise, you know, like the people in my life don't want a high interaction. They just want a normal human interaction from somebody they love and care about. And that's something I thought about, you know, like I thought about people who lived with me. I was like, they don't want to come home and see you high on fucking mushrooms, unable to speak for yourself and unable to be a regular human being. They just want to interact with you like you're a normal human being. They want nothing more than the real you. And you know, that's why if we're going to do things like this, we're going to do it when they don't know about it. You know, we're not going to show them. We're not going to, you know, like maybe you can talk about it with them sometime where you're completely sober and, you know, have, you know, but even then, you know, you want to keep it to yourself, you know, not go up to them high at all, ever. Never interact with them while high because, you know, I just kind of taught myself how not to bother people when I'm tripping, you know, keep my drug experiences away from my loved ones, you know, until, you know, I'm a little bit more emotionally mature, which, you know, even now I'm not, but, you know, still, it's cool to think about, but, you know. But, you know, not a lot of that stuck, but a good amount of it did, you know. But it's not, you know, it's not like fucking, it's not like you're talking to God or anything. Any thoughts of God you have are kind of just part of the delusional mix of thinking. I don't think there's no such thing as God, but you know what I mean. If you think you're talking to God, you're probably just talking to yourself, pretending to be God. You know. Or who knows, you know. From what I experienced, it was my delusions while I was on the drug. It was not God. You know what I mean? But I did have that experience where I felt like I was talking to God, having a delusional God conversation. You know, talking with my dog, who was like not alive. And that was like, you know, not real. It was a delusion. But it is fun for me, you know, because I'm like, you know, that was my lifestyle. And you know, now that it's been so long, I put a lot of that into my, you know, like what I make artistically and musically. I put a lot of that craziness and chaos into what I make, where it doesn't exactly have definition or shape, you know. It's flexible, you know, I can do whatever I want with it. I never keep it in a box, you know. It never has a solidified shape. It's always something that can go any direction. You never really know what's going to happen next, except for my music, you know. It's not, you know, a lot of it comes from me, but, you know, like, I definitely try to put a lot of that experience into what I make sometimes, you know, both artistically and musically. But it's not like everything is that, you know. And I don't really base a lot of my philosophies off of it either, because I want logical philosophies, not drug philosophies. So, you know, I base a lot of it off of me and Tomb's conversation where we talk about sciencey stuff and, you know, cool evidence stuff and not drug stuff, you know. Like, I just learned about mistletoe therapy, so that's cool. I'm thinking about that a little bit. It's cool, but, you know. And I base some of my philosophies off of, you know, the people I interacted with down in treatment, you know, people who were going through the same thing as I was going through, you know. And I base a lot of my philosophies off of, like, psychology stuff that I learned while I was down there. Stuff about the brain and stuff about, you know, and I learn a lot. And I base it off of what I learned and not off of the drugs, because that's stupid. You know, if you do any sort of drug and you're like, you learn something crazy about, like, you know, about what you think is true about God or something, and you base your philosophy off of that, like, you know, and solely off of that, then you're not, you know, I don't take you seriously as a philosopher, because you're basing your philosophies off of a delusion that you had while high, from my perspective, from my understanding. Unless you've got something to back it up, don't bring that shit to me, because, you know, I want to know why think that, you know, and if your reasons are a drug, it's not gonna cut it for me, you know. You know, because a drug is a drug, you know, no, even if it's mushrooms, you know, maybe good for like therapeutic use, but it's a drug nonetheless. So don't come to me with drug philosophies, because I don't buy it. Say if you're basing your philosophies off of cool science stuff, or like, you know, I don't really take philosophy seriously just from word of mouth. You know, this guy said God is real, so God is real. This guy said something worded cool. You know, his words, the words that he used were interesting and wise of God. I don't like that, because I like, you know, and this is just, you know, this is just my opinions. I like philosophy that's based off of evidence and, you know, like things that make you think about other things that are real and have direct evidence supporting them. Like, you know, and like, it's not always about space, but like, you know, sometimes I make odd observations about people and generalized groups that I notice, and I make sure to pay lots of attention, because, you know, I want to know that I'm not just making an aimless hypothesis, you know. I want to know that I have at least a little bit of experience and evidence to back up what I'm saying from what I've seen. I observe a lot of interactions that I have. I really pay attention, you know. Like, I will pay attention to every interaction I have and keep that as something you know, I keep it as information that I will use to further my understanding of people with every interaction I have, because, you know, it's better to know the ins and outs of the way other people work than to not know anything about the next person you're gonna find, you know. Because I like to be informed. I like to know what I'm getting myself into, you know. And there's never gonna be a time where I don't, you know, store information about the person I've interacted with, because, you know, I'm not saying it's about, you know, like being defensive or anything, but, you know, I like to understand the differences between people's interactions, and I like to compare and contrast them and think about, you know, sometimes I'm caught off guard, so, you know, I use that, you know, to debate whether everybody is unique, or if there's certain traits, if there's certain defined traits that are present in everybody, and, you know, if it's like little modifiers that are on people's personalities, you know, and try and see if other people have those traits in my mind and compare them and see, try and observe the similarities between people and try to, you know, understand maybe if, you know, if instead of, you know, just saying everybody's unique and stopping there, maybe saying, you know, there's a finite amount of traits that exist, and, you know, different people have different ones, but at the end of the day, there's a list of specific traits that one person can have out of however many there is. And see, maybe I think of it like a bunch of little slots, and the traits being little things that plug into those slots. And, you know, that person has you know, specific slots filled up with traits, you know, and traits being like, you know, I guess, like, you know, I don't know, like fucking, how do you know, I don't know, kind of like a skill tree, but not even really that. Well, kind of, no, not even, if it was just like, not like I don't know, just like different traits that someone can have out of a list of traits. And, they have a certain amount of those traits. This person is this way and has this trait and not this one, instead of being like, oh, everybody's unique, everybody's different and there's no finite amount of possibilities, everybody is unlimitedly unique and there's no similarity between one person and the next. It's not exactly what I said, but maybe there's a finite list of traits. Fuck this stupid bag. And, one person's brain has, this trait or this trait out of a list of all these traits that exist. And maybe you can determine how somebody's going to be based on the traits that they have, based on your interactions, and you want to be able to tell whether those interactions are genuine or not by knowing your traits and knowing how it can be, knowing which traits people can have, and knowing how to see if someone is, kind of pretending to have these traits, at first interaction, so you can see deeper into who they are to be better equipped to handle that interaction, so you don't behave in a certain way that reacts negatively with that person's traits. You never want, in my opinion, conflicting vibes. It's my attempt to sort of match wavelengths and kind of read the room, know which traits interact good or bad together, and see who I can interact with the best and the least best. And I don't know, it's I don't really think about it like that in the moment, but that's that's like just kind of how, that's just kind of how I interact with people. Like, just kind of look into this person, see how they are, and try to understand them so that I can better, just normal interaction. But, I feel like it goes deep, because I compare, like I said, I compare and contrast people's personalities and, the list of traits and whatever. We go in circles, making sure that I know how people are and how people can be, and seeing, the way I handle one person, maybe I can handle this other person in a similar way and it'll work, kind of like when you experience something and you do something different based on what you learned the last time you experienced it. Only this time, you're going into the new situation with the experience of last time, knowing for sure what to do. And what I've learned, let me tell you, what I've learned is that for some people, no matter what, you just want to remain calm and never put more energy into your emotion than you need to. Keep your emotions level, and any frustrated or, you know, or amplified emotion that person will have will diffuse at your calm interactions. You know, passiveness, you know, or, you know, if someone's calm, then just stay calm and that interaction will go smoothly. So being passive is something that I've discovered is a pretty good trait, pretty universal trait for most situations, you know. But sometimes, you know, I'm not perfect, you know. Sometimes I can be a little aggressive, mainly online, and that's just because, you know, my traits are pretty, you know, are pretty, like, I don't know, I guess you could say, like, my traits are pretty, like, wanting to have the last say and whatever, you know. I can be pretty, like, you know, I want to feel like I've won because that makes me feel satisfied. And obviously that's not how you should handle interactions, because, you know, I feel like that trait could be labeled as like control, you know, over the situation, which is not a useful trait, something I'm working on getting rid of, you know. But, you know, you can't really get rid of a trait, so, you know, there will be other traits, you know, people fake traits, so you know, what I sometimes do on accident is, like, be passive in sort of an antagonizing way. I can be really antagonistic and just have little passive interactions that will make someone angry and, you know, make someone feel like they overreacted, which is not a good thing to do, which is also something I'm kind of working on, you know. Because that's kind of, you know, I can be kind of smug, and I can be kind of like, oh, whatever, you know, that's okay. I don't care. You know, what's the big deal? You know, I think it's about control. I think you're being overreactive, you know. I think you just need to relax, you know. Meanwhile, on the inside, I'm pissed, you know, and I'm just putting my energy into making that person feel like insecure about their reaction, which is not, you know, and it's not like I'm thinking of this as I do it. It's just, I'm kind of describing just how, you know, like how I'm feeling I want things to go in the moment, you know, from what I've observed. Because I do keep track, you know. Or, you know, I've done this before. If someone gets on me about, you know, if someone comes to me and they're like, you know, oh, you're this type of person, I'll be like, well, you know, for example, there was an argument I had about, like, you know, this person took a picture of somebody's lawn and it had like Trump stuff on it. And I was like, oh, you know, typical fucking Redditor, because I'm neutral. I hate Democratic and Republicans. So I was like, oh, typical Democrat, just fucking, you know, being your side of the party. Nothing special here, you know. You know, don't try to force your beliefs onto anybody. And someone called me a MAGA cultist. So I was like, well, you're the one who fucking put this dude in office, so it's your fault. It's all your fault because you let this dumb fuck win. And, you know, where's your accountability? You know, you're the one who failed because you suck. You know what I mean? And that's not very nice. But, you know, I kind of did that like, oh, I'm not responsible for, you know, Trump being in office. You know, it's your fault. And to call me a MAGA cultist is just your insecurity about losing an election that you could have very well made differently. Kind of acting like, kind of placing this sort of, you know, accountability onto one person. Like, as if, you know, they are a representative of fucking the Democratic Party, which is stupid because I don't know anything about politics. And that's outside of my area of knowledge. So I just kind of use what I know to try and defuse that person's confidence, which is not what I'm thinking about in the moment. It's just like my reaction. I'm very reactionary. So my conversational reaction is to sort of take that road, that high horse road, which is what I'm working on. You know, I got a 3-day ban for that, which is fair, because that was fucking stupid. Which, you know, I sort of observed my reaction to that, and I'm like, okay, well, I didn't really need to do that, you know. I could have just stopped talking anyways and just left it there. Which is, it's hard not to do that, because it's like your little defense mechanism, you know, to deflect something, because you're like, I can just fucking, you know, I can just say something that this person doesn't really know how to respond to and get rid of it, you know, so I can have the last say and they can just fuck off, which is just kind of a pussy thing to do, you know. Which is just what I'm thinking about today. I'm just brainstorming right now. I am kind of thinking about it right now and kind of laying out what I've observed of my interactions. Because now I'm in an observational kind of mindset, because I started talking about observational things. So that's where I am now. But, you know, I've done really well on the way I handle, like, comments that I disagree with. Or, like, now, you know, I just kind of drop a little comment in there. You know, don't really do much more than that. But, you know, I would prefer if I just didn't. But, you know, I'm working on it. You know, by doing these little observational sessions where I think about that one thing I did and I'm like, here's how I could do that differently. And then, you know, I think about it a lot so that the next time I do it, I'm like, oh, I thought about this before. And then I just do what I was thinking about, you know. Once again, this isn't, I'm talking about it like I think about all this while I'm doing it, but it's just your autopilot, you know. It's like kind of learning to work with your autopilot and learning to fucking, you know, direct it in different ways, you know, because, you know, it's all about, because it's not this complicated when you're doing it. It's as simple as just changing the way you do something, you know, kind of subconsciously, but also consciously at the same time, you know. It's like choosing to do something differently because you remember the last time it happened, you know. So like the way anybody does it. I'm just overthinking it right now, which is helpful to me. You know, this is just my overcomplicated observation of what I do and my I'm just meta thinking right now, you know. Sometimes I'll see people post these fucking, like, posts about ADHD where they're like, don't do that, you know? That's offensive to people with ADHD. And then I just, you know, I have ADHD, so I think, you know, like that's stupid. Like, you can barely be offensive to people with ADHD, you know? I don't give a fuck what people do, you know, thinking they have ADHD. I don't give a fuck, because it's just a stupid way that my brain reacts to things. I don't care, you know? What am I, a fucking black person? Like, it's not like someone's calling me the N-word. Someone's just being an idiot, and that's what people do sometimes, is people are idiots, you know? And I think, why would this person do that? That, people online are stupid and everybody's always known that. Like, why do you feel the need to fucking make a stupid little video talking about it? Like, nobody cares, and that's not going to change anything, You're just, I think at the time, you're just wanting attention, You just want to feel like you have something to be offended about because you have a slight little mental configuration. Like, who fucking cares? You know what I mean? I'm just like, shut the fuck up, Like, if I see a video of someone, like, doing a little fake ADHD attention surge, I'm just like, that's kind of cringe. And then I just scroll by because, the less attention you pay to it, I don't know, like, what do you think you're going to do? Make them feel embarrassed? You know how many people are like them that are watching and supporting those videos? You're not going to convince their entire audience to stop fucking supporting them, because most of their audience who supports them does that exact same thing and thinks the exact same way. So, if you have ADHD, you know you have it because you have ADHD. You know what I mean? Sometimes just don't fucking function because you're fucking fucked. That's fair, but it doesn't mean you're the fucking leader and you need to say things about it. That means you just live your life and stop fucking also trying to get attention. That's offensive. Shut up. Like, literally. Just shut up. Who cares? That's kind of what I think most of the time. Which I don't feel like, that's where I don't feel like I'm really wrong, because these motherfuckers just go on there and they're like, stop. You're gonna, like, I don't know. What are you doing exactly? What are you trying to do? Because really, like, it's obvious, all you need to do is know that, that person doesn't have it, and just scroll and move on and don't care, because that person's just going to keep doing what they're doing no matter what. Like that person who was faking Tourette's, Well, actually, she did make an apology thing, and no, she didn't. She just tried to kind of justify it, but, it's, who cares, She sucks, and everybody who is real knows it. So, just ignore it. Well, not everybody can tell. Whatever. It's complicated. I feel like with ADHD, it really doesn't matter, because it's not, in my experience, it's not really that hard of a thing to deal with, Like, not everybody takes medication, I take some bipolar medication and a little bit of anxiety, depression medication, Fucking crane fly. Fuck away from it. Oh, God. Oh, Jesus. I hate crane flies. Fucking annoying. Get out of here, bitch. Anyways, fucking dumbass crane fly. Hope that thing gets eaten by a fucking bird. Anyways. God. Why do they fly right at you? If they're trying to survive, why do they fly right at you? It's stupid. Like, doesn't it know that I can just swat it out of the air into the ground and step on it? Like, God, fucking lesser life form. Like, I don't know, I drink an energy drink, so I'm observation. I'm just tired of fucking, I spend too much time online, but that, that's because that's what I like to do. I like to criticize other people for things, because, people suck sometimes, and I feel like, there's people who think they're right, and in reality, they're all just stupid. They're stupid people, and they're stupid people who come after stupid people, you know? And neither of them are smart. They're both stupid, you know? Like these fuckers trying to fucking make these little fucking, you're being offensive to people with ADHD videos. Like, who the fuck cares? Just go do your thing. Nobody gives a fuck, you know? Anybody who gives anybody a diagnosis can tell. It's not like they're really gonna benefit anything from it, except for a dumbass audience, you know? Who cares, you know? What are people gonna do? Really? You know? Like, not much. They're just gonna be like, oh, hey, I'm stupid and I believe you. Who cares? Fucking literally. Anybody who knows anything will know that they aren't genuine, you know? You don't need to act like you're the public defender of ADHD and go up there and try and fight, you know, the fucking, I don't know, quote unquote battle. You know what I mean? You're not doing anything for anybody except for, you know, getting attention, you know, because, you know, people with ADHD can make little cries for attention too. It's not impossible, you know. Just because you have ADHD, you don't want attention either, you know, which is why you're making that video in the first place. It's fucking stupid. Seriously. And then you got these fucking artists who are complaining about the algorithm. Like, come on, shut up. Nobody gives a fuck except for your fans. It's like, who cares about the algorithm, man? Like, literally. Like, if nobody catered to the algorithm, then it would be useless and it wouldn't work the same way it does. So in reality, the algorithm is the way it is. You cater to, which is, you know, I just did the thing that I do all the time, but, you know, I don't know. That one's less valid, you know. It still annoys me. I don't know. It annoys me because it's not something that I would do, and that's, you know, it's something that I kind of veto in my content creating process, is any sort of complaining about the algorithm or complaining about my sub count, you know, like, who cares? You know, not me. So why am I complaining about it? I'm not, because I don't care, you know. These people that do care, I guess, is valid, but me personally, I don't care. So I see it and I'm like, oh, that's so cringe. Why do they care? You know, which isn't valid of me, but, you know, I do it anyways because fucking, I don't know, I'm biased towards my own method because I see my method is superior, you know, because I don't know, you know, I have a superiority complex sometimes, you know. Don't we all? But, you know, other people are better at, you know, keeping their superiority complex in line. Sometimes I get a little aggressive with mine because, you know, I'm like, oh, you're complaining about your subscribers. Look at you, you know. You're just fucking stupid. And, you know, I say things and I think that that's going to make a difference, but I don't. Kind of know that it's not going to make a difference, but I still complain about it because I like putting that information into the world, you know. Because, you know, as embarrassing as it is to admit, like, I view the way I do things as the less cringe way, you know, the less annoying way, because I don't know, I've gone on to Discords before. I don't really go into Discords anymore for this reason, but there's people who will just be really fucking stupid and, like, you know, like fabric coders, you know? They're fucking cringy and stupid and dumb, and they're little fucking bitches who think their way is better than anybody else's way, and don't even try, because, you know, if you don't already know, there's no way you're going to figure it out. I've heard the stories from Tomb, and it's actually fucking retarded, you know, the way these dumb head up their asses interact with people, you know. Fabric's a great mod loader, but the community kind of sucks. You know, not everybody, but a lot of them do, you know. And they're kind of entitled, just like me, you know, but at least I don't fucking, you know, tell people they shouldn't even try, you know. Or at least I don't shit on people for just wanting to fucking make stuff, you know. You're just wanting to know how to do something, you know. And then the fucking Terraria, don't even get me started, man. Corruption, like underground and everything, and we mined this big hole in the world, and he went and like posted it, and they were like, why would you do that? And they got all cringy and Terraria about it because, you know, they're entitled and annoying and fucking, you know, superiority complex to the max. And that's sort of why I have this filter in which I look at people, because I've heard these stories, and, you know, I think, well, this sort of person might be like this. This sort of person might interact like this. This sort of person probably talks like this, yada, 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 traits and whatnot. And that's sort of my thought process. That isn't actually like that, but a little bit different, just kind of a feeling. And, you know, then I go and make stuff like this, where I'm like, oh, shut up with your fucking entitled superiority complex, because I feel like I've seen it before, and I know exactly what's happening, you know, because it's fucking annoying to me. It's annoying having ADHD and then looking and seeing these fucking people who think that because they have ADHD, they're some sort of VIP, and they have the entitlement to go and fucking tell people that they're being offensive. It's just fucking stupid. Like, it's like, you know, it's like the people who complain about, like, Mexican cultural appropriation, like the sombrero and whatnot. And, you know, like, but in this case, it's embarrassing because it's someone who's actually, you know, in that sort of same brain arrangement, and they're fucking doing something that you don't really agree with because it's annoying, and you wish people would just shut up and be how you are. But, you know, not in my mind, not everybody's perfect like me, but I'm not perfect, so I just hate it. Why? Like, why do people have to be that way? It's just so annoying. Like, why can't you just not be a fucking blue hair girl, you know? Like, seriously, how hard is that, you know? And then I see these people with autism, like, oh, neurotypical people, blah, blah, blah. Like, please, shut up. Just shut up. So annoying. And that's kind of my thought process behind it. I see it, and I'm just like, ugh. You know what I bet you do? You know, there's a pretty good amount of autistic people who are employed, and I bet you just sit on your ass all day and talk about neurotypical people and how they're oppressing you. That's sort of how I think, because that's how it usually happens. You know, that's people who just sit on their ass, people who have autism and who just sit on their ass all day, who are a college graduate, and they're just like, neurotypical people are so, you know, offensive to me, while I sit in my big luxury gamer chair lifestyle and, you know, don't do anything except for sit here and criticize people who don't have the same brain arrangement as I do. Like, why is that why is that the thing that people do now? Why is that what's considered being a good person now? You know? Why can't being a good person mean just fucking living and not, you know, not complaining about people who work and have a life, and while you sit on your ass and do nothing and rely on people around you, you know? Like, you know, and if you do that, then just, like, shut up, you know? And just keep going about your life and making stuff that isn't fucking stupid. You know what I mean? Oh, God, dude. I just think about it a lot when I watch it, you know? Just like, why? Why even make that? Like, don't you know how stupid that is? Like, don't you know how fucking annoying that is? You know? Like everybody wants a reason to feel special, and everybody wants a reason to say, this person is offending me. So, you know, treat me like my rights are being violated, and, you know, like I need special, like, treatment because my rights are being violated because I have a different brain arrangement, you know? Like, everybody wants to be an oppressed minority, and that's the way it is these days. You know, nobody can just be a regular guy, just a Joe Schmo living it up like me. You know, I'm a Joe Schmo. You know, I have my little mental quirks, but, you know, the only reason I bring it up is because of these fucking other people who have little mental quirks and are being fucking stupid, you know? Like, I don't have autism, which is why I was talking about the ADHD thing first, you know? But, you know, I'm done. I'm sick of it. These fucking dumb fucks, you know? Like, how about you just go and you make content that's creative? You can draw stuff, you can, you know, do anything but just sit there on your ass and complain about things that don't affect you at all, you know? How about that? That would be a pretty awesome thing to do, because then you're actually doing something, you know? You're actually accomplishing something, which is what everybody wants to do. You're not going to accomplish anything by complaining about things that don't matter. You know? Now I'm just complaining about things, but I'm going to do that because, you know, my brain is going through the motions, I don't know the word. But, you know, it's annoying. Everybody wants to be an oppressed minority, you know? Everybody wants a reason to feel entitled. Everybody wants a reason to say, hey, you are oppressing me, and you are a bad person, and I am a good person. You know, I'm a good person because, you know, I have autism. That makes me a good person. You know? It's like, why don't you just die? Maybe not that, but why don't you just shut up? I mean, you know? It's fucking annoying. And why don't you just continue living your good life that you feel comfortable every day, you know? And then you go online and you see fucking someone doing something that doesn't matter, where you could just scroll by and be like, I don't care. But, you know, there's hypocrites like me who can't really do that. But, you know, at least I'm not fucking complaining about people fucking, like, offending me, you know? I'm complaining about fucking retards who are, you know, who are bad for the world and bad for the internet as a whole and bad for people who are still developing and see this stuff, and then they become fucking stupid like you. So, you know, it's like a disease. You can spread it, and, you know, that's why I wish this wasn't happening. That's why I wish these things didn't happen, because, you know, these people are spreading their retardation across the internet. And they're spreading it to people who are still developing, so they're gonna go and be like you and be annoying and fucking making excuses and fucking just sitting on their ass all day and relying on their parents. Because it worked on me. And then I woke up, you know? I was like, I have ADHD, so I'm compromised. How could I ever live? I just need to keep feeding into my ADHD and keep feeding it and letting it consume me, and then, you know, and then I can say I'm a minority who's compromised, And then I was like, wait a minute, that's fucking retarded. That's the dumbest fucking most narcissistic shit I could ever do. You know? How could I drag everybody around me down with me by feeding into my weaknesses and, you know, and then using my weaknesses to criticize other people, you know? Instead, I could go and live my life, and then I can tell people what I've learned about my experience doing that, you know? How I've looked at myself and realized that what I'm doing is fucking retarded, and that I should just shut up and live my life. You know? Oh, and there's so many more things I think about, you know, that I'm not going to cover because I've already covered them before. So if you want to see them, just go back and look on private, the live streams even, so you can look at it, because it's all very valuable information, I feel. You know, that'll definitely contribute towards being chill and making other people chill, because I want to spread chillness. You know, I want to spread knowledge that'll just make you like, whatever, man. I'll just keep playing my video game, working my job, and maybe spread my thoughts around on a live stream and not fucking make cancerous videos that are gonna spread like a disease through the fucking world, you know? Oh, God, it just fucking annoys me, man. Because all I really want is a world of people with, like, logic. You know what I mean? All I really want is a world where people are just fucking chill and cool and, you know, able to just sit down and have a conversation. Like, me and my brother, we can have debates and call each other stupid and, like, get really mad at each other over our ideas, and then afterwards we'll be like, that was a pretty good debate. But a debate with my sister, you know, that determines what type of person you are, and, you know, your beliefs are a direct description of you as a human being. Every single little detail. And that's not fair, you know, unless you're fucking like a neo-Nazi or something, you know? Like, if you're just, you know, if you have a certain belief on a pretty mundane topic, then it should be fine. And you should just keep it in the debate. And, you know, I'm done, you know? And this is why people always call me weird. And this is why people always come in and they're like, this guy's a druggie. Because of fucking retards like this spreading their stupid disease across the internet. You know, their diseased beliefs across the internet. Reaching out to people like the very people you see here sometimes fucking in here like, you know, you're a weirdo doing crack because I have autism. And I sit on my ass all day. And that's why you're a weirdo with crack. Because I sit on my ass all day and live in a tiny little cushioned velvet world. You know? It's like, shut up, man. If you lived in the real world, you would know that life is tough. Sometimes you fall into a ditch that takes, you know, and maybe some treatment. You know, maybe a little bit of support from family, and then you get back on your feet and you keep going, you know. My favorite song is like, hi, I'm a retard, can't tie my shoe, I rely on you, keep me alive, you know. Bars right there, man. Fucking bars, man. And they go and fucking talk about stupid shit. Like, just wake up, man. These people, they call these people woke. But you know what they are? They're fucking asleep as fuck and dreaming, okay? They aren't woke. Being woke is seeing things for how they really are and fucking literally getting up and moving and living. Being woke is being alive and being asleep is what these fucking ADHD offended people do. You know? Look at me, I'm woke. Not like politically woke, I'm like real life woke, living and making money and fucking taking care of myself, you know. And the people who back me up, you know, I am taking what they give me and I am making as much as I can out of it for now, you know. I'm doing what I can to fucking better my life with what they give me instead of feeding off of their resources like fucking United Healthcare does with their fucking people, you know? Come on, man. Like, take what you have and do something with it, you know? Seriously. Tomb does that, you know? He feels so trapped, but he makes the most of what he has, you know? He does what he does with what he has, you know? He puts his ideas into stuff, you know? And that's what everybody should be doing. You know, he doesn't go online and complain and be like, you know, he complains in conversations, but that's where the complaining belongs, in a conversation, and not like a disease spreading throughout the internet, making everybody into a fucking Karen blue hair bitch, you know? Like, seriously. It's a little bit aggressive verbally, but, you know, that's with emotionally fueled. In a less aggressive way, it could be spreading like a disease and making everybody a blue hair girl. Okay? Is that better? Of course it is. You know? Heed my words. Because they are fucking real logic. Down to earth. You step outside, you take a breath of fresh air, and that's where I'm pulling my logic from. Okay? I'm pulling my logic from real life experience and getting outside and exploring. And you know, I've fucking walked 16 miles before, but that doesn't really contribute anything to this. But you know, I got out there and I found out, you know, what it's like to not just be able to go home, you know, because I was like, holy shit, that's another 16 miles. Like, if I go home, I'm gonna be fucking exhausted. I have no, you know, I used up all my lunch. The only way I'm getting out of this situation is if I take the bus or call a family member. And I got myself into this situation. So I need to take accountability. Be like, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to explore, you know? And I've had so much experience of being humbled and being put in my place so hard, you know? Been fucking thrown into my place. Been fucking smashed into my place. Nailed into my place. Railed into my place. Just fucking had it handed to me so many times, you know? And, you know, I understand reality. And I understand that even in that, like, my ego never dies, you know? The only time my ego has ever died was my first acid trip, where, you know, or was that 2-tab acid trip where I experienced, you know, real loss of control, where you really have to make do for the time being. And if you're ever tripping, never, ever regret, like, this is the only time I'll say do something specific while tripping, you know, because everybody's experience is different, but never, ever wish you hadn't taken it while you're tripping, because that is the best way to have a horrible time, wishing it was over. Don't ever do that, ever. Don't ever wish it was over. Always be glad that if you do take it, always be glad that you did it, because that's literally what's gonna keep it going smooth and nice, you know. Anyways, my phone's getting low. This was an informational live stream where I drank an energy drink and now my thoughts are flowing. So, peace out, brothers.